Now it's the chance for ROA members to pose questions to the board. If I may just remind you that before asking a question, if you could please give your name for the benefit of the record, it would be appreciated. I do have one or two questions that have been sent to us by members in advance, and if we have time, then I will raise them. I open the floor to questions.
My name is Patrick Milmo. My question is directed to the board. I would like to inquire what is the board's position in relation to the question whether restrictions should be imposed where there are several owners of a horse on the number that can be admitted to the paddock.
Very topical. Chris, right, may I pass that one to you?
Thanks, Charlie. It is something that the board has been discussing at length. It's quite a delicate subject because we're very keen to embrace the move towards syndication and syndicated members, and obviously we want to help those syndicates get as many of their members into the paddock as possible, because that's one of the main reasons that they're going into syndicate ownership of horses. But we're also aware that there have been some problems and there have been some very near misses, and that we're living in an age when if there are health and safety issues, if we don't deal with them proactively, we might have them dealt with by other people over our heads, and that's something we want to avoid. We don't want to have a situation where there is a major accident in a paddock and then a government body suddenly says, right, that's it, because of that you can't do it. I mean, it's amazing how these things happen. I saw the other day that a girl was killed by a bouncy castle, and immediately there's a question raised about all bouncy castles have to be licensed and so forth. So you can see where we're coming from in that respect. We haven't come to a conclusion. We're still talking about it. We're talking about aspects about whether it helps if a horse goes round the paddock in one direction or the other direction, whether we should have a total restriction on how many people per horse or how many people per paddock. Clearly for a midweek meeting when there's very few people there, it's not an issue, but for the big meetings it is an issue, and it's something which we have to address, and we are working on coming up with a proposal which we will put to people in due course and hopefully in the very near future.
If I may just add from an executive level that those conversations are ongoing with the RCA and the ROA, and we'll be taking a paper back to the board. If it's not July, it'll be September.
This is surely not a question which just involves owners. If one looks at the numbers of persons in the paddock before a big race at Royal Ascot, for example, the numbers of owners present, I would have thought, were in a very small minority. The number of agents seem to be legion, and of course certain owners seem to bring an entourage numbering in dozens. So it needs rather a broader outlook than just saying, well, how many owners should be allowed in?
We're very aware of that too. It's something we've discussed. There are obviously quite a few people in racing, professionals in racing, who do feel that they have a right to be in the paddock at all times and on all occasions, regardless of whether they actually have a specific participation with any particular horse in that race. We also realise that that's something that which might be very difficult to address, but it has to be addressed, because if we don't, as I say, an accident is likely to happen at some point in time, and we will have a restriction imposed from above on us, and that's what we have to avoid.
Any more questions? Sir.
Hello, thank you. Simon Double, I run Solario Racing, a syndicate organisation, so backing on from that question there, I'm also a member of the Racehorse Syndicates Association, and on behalf of them wondered what's the best way that the RSA can communicate to the ROA to actually get across what we think are the needs of syndicates generally.
We had a meeting with the RSA recently with Alan Pickering, so if I may, Alan, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, I mean, I think that an owner is an owner is an owner. I came into racehorse ownership myself via syndication, so I have a lot of empathy with the syndicate sector. And indeed, there are those who are in syndicates who are simultaneously sole owners as well. So it is an us and them concept, but it is a way of trying to find a mechanism of tapping the enthusiasm, and in some cases, but not all, the youth of some syndicate members, to bring them and their perspective into the ROA. And Charlie and I and Sam met with Dan Abrahams a few weeks ago to see how we can best build that liaison without creating a division within the ownership family. And we have agreed to liaise on a regular basis throughout the rest of this year, making sure that we broaden the interface between the ROA and associations such as yours and the syndicates who go to make up those associations. But that isn't in the aim of cementing differences. It's in the aim of making sure that we all form part of one family. As I said, I began as a syndicate owner, and I was probably richer when I was a syndicate owner than I am now that I'm a sole owner. Now, whether that's coincidence or cause and effect, I don't know, but it isn't a rich person's versus poor person's concept. It's just a case of how much are people contributing through their ownership to the racing industry, and to make sure that they feel wanted and get a fair return on their financial contribution, and indeed a fair hearing for their views.
Thank you. Paul Dixon, ex-ROA president and ex-chairman of the Horsemen's Group. I wanted to ask Charlie, really, and the board, with this unprecedented weather that we're having at the moment, it's obviously becoming apparent that the field sizes are getting remarkably smaller. There's welfare issues for horses with the very fast ground that we're having. Yesterday, I think there were races at Pontefract where there were 2 or 3 runner races. Are we, the ROA, the horsemen, working closely with the BHA and with the RCA's contingency plans? So therefore, if a course is deemed to be acceptable, that the ground, no matter how much water they put on it, may be unsafe, that you've got a contingency plan, a backup plan to move that race to another meeting, all weather, or be it what it will?
Absolutely. Those discussions are taking place at the moment with the BHA. We're very acutely aware of the potential welfare issues at stake here. However, from the should we or shouldn't we race question, that is one for the racecourse and the BHA and their inspectors to come to that decision. However, we must also recognise there are some horses for whom the faster ground is suitable, so we must not take away their chances. But we are absolutely having conversations with the BHA around how we can make sure that replacement fixtures are put on for those horses and racing where the ground is more suitable at the moment.
Give our owners opportunities to run?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Does the board have anything to add? Sorry, no. Kate.
Kate Austin. Apologies, everybody. I'm going to use the B word. I do apologise. Post-Brexit, staffing. It's Racing Welfare Week. We say we care for our staff who look after our horses, and we do. But what is being done in practical terms to ensure that staff who work in racing and care for our horses day in, day out, are protected and seen as a special case, not just from the EU, but in terms of immigration from all over the world? Because certainly in my trainer's yard, there are staff from both the EU, the Middle East, and indeed from the Indian subcontinent. So it's a huge issue. what's being done. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Chris, if I may pass that down to you.
That's a bit of a hospital pass, Charlie.
It is.
Obviously, it's a huge issue, and you've just highlighted one very important part of it. It's not the only issue involved with Brexit that we're having to face. In general, we're facing the same issues that many other businesses are facing. We want some clarity on what the situation is going to be. Our main concern as owners is, as you say, the staffing in general, the movement of horses to be able to race in other countries, both legally, officially, and also pragmatically, and also the movement of the stable staff with the horses, because clearly a horse can't be kept in a horse box for hours at Dover when it's planning on running at a race in France, and it can't go unless the stable staff can go with the horse. And also, you might have a similar issue with jockeys that is going to, could be a factor as well, as it would be with footballers that from, coming in to play for football teams. There's all of these issues. Now, we're aware that the TBA have been doing quite a good job on this, leading the industry in terms of negotiations, because obviously there's a lot of other TBA issues, but and some of those affect us, and some of those don't necessarily affect us because geldings are treated differently. There's extra duty on geldings, so the TBA don't have to worry about geldings. They're only worried about movement of mares and foals. We're on the case as much as we can be. We might get some more clarity after Friday. We might not. Who knows? Charlie and I went to have a meeting with Nick Rust and Will Lamb at the BHA a few weeks ago. Nick Rust might well choose to mention that in his speech, which he's making a bit later. We're going to arrange for Will Lamb to come to not the next board meeting, but the one after, to have a specific discussion on Brexit with Will Lamb. We may or may not have some more clarity by that time. We don't know. We're aware of the problems. We're doing as much as we can do, but we are a little bit like other businesses. To get back to your specific question on stable staff, that's something else we've addressed. It is difficult. We've gone into how we can have more British stable staff. It's not easy. There's also a problem, or I don't know if I dare say it, that in terms of weight of potential British stable staff makes that quite difficult. I'm aware also that some of the stable staff are EU, some of them are non-EU. That itself is another issue in terms of the non-EU ones are not Brexit issue, but they are Home Office and government issues. It is a very difficult situation, and we're aware of the problems, and we are doing whatever we can do to try and help the industry move forward here. And we will report back as soon as there's anything specific to report on.
Given you mentioned earlier what a good friend Matt Hancock has been to the ROA, I'm hoping that some of the MPs that are involved are actually being co-opted, as it were, into some of these discussions. I hope that's going on too.
Well, we're aware of Matt Hancock and how helpful he can be here. Ultimately, it's an issue for the government and the cabinet, and it doesn't need me to tell you that the government is divided, the cabinet's divided, the country's divided, everybody's divided on it. We can't solve those problems. All we've got to do is to try and protect our industry and to allow our horses to be looked after by competent staff, and to allow our owners to race their horses in France and in Ireland, and even, dare I say, to allow Irish horses to come and race in England, because although you might feel, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a situation that the Irish couldn't bring their horses to Cheltenham, we'd all be a lot poorer in this industry if that was the case.
Thanks very much. My name's Andrew Heatherton. I'm very interested to find out what the board's view is in terms of party nights. Over the last few weeks, I've been to a number of events, and I've noticed that when there's a party night, the number of owners that turn up rightly is reduced because it is not enjoyable. So what can the ROA board do to encourage racecourses to ensure that, one, people don't get drunk to the extent that it's very embarrassing, messy, and creates an unpleasant environment, but also to make sure that when you want to take your family, as I do, that we have an enjoyable social evening where we're not bombarded by alcohol selling.
Patricia, as part of the Gold Standard Committee, could I ask you to take that one?
Yes, you all know about the Gold Standard initiative that the ROA carries out each year for the best large racecourse and the best small racecourse and the most improved. The last couple of years there have been specific questions about alcohol and how racecourses are managing that, because we do have a lot of feedback, particularly from families, to say when they're attending afternoon races, people are gearing up for the party night ahead, and it's just not attractive. So we do go into quite a bit of detail with racecourses about what they're doing to manage alcohol consumption. Specifically on how the race experience is either enhanced or is detracted from by the nights. Again, that forms part of the sort of questioning of the racecourses, and the feedback that we do get informs that. I think racecourses are becoming a lot more aware of the experience of the party nights than they had been before, at least we hope they are, by this set of checklist questions that we ask. But it's something that we're monitoring. It's very much in the news at the moment with certain racecourses. We hope that our input to the racecourses by being on the ground and talking to people at the courses will have an effect. But we are, as a board, looking at it very closely and how we can maintain the relationships with the relevant people to ensure that it's being dealt with.
Can I build on that, Charlie, please?
Of course.
As chairman of the Race Day Committee that Patricia's just referred to, we have ensured that the Gold Standard Award is quite dynamic in the way it's provided to racecourses. Originally, and Stephen Astaire was very active on the board first time round, he felt that owners weren't getting a fair crack of the whip, if that's not a horrible pun, when they went to the racecourse. And we used the awarding of the Gold Standard as a means of raising the bar, but not that sort of bar either, but at a time when we were going against the flow, as it were, owners were being taken for granted. But we got to a point where the award was being given to more than half the race courses, so it wasn't acting as the spur, horrible pun again, for future improvements. I guess at that stage, the only thing harder than winning the award was losing the award. So we introduced a competitive element in it in the way that Patricia has just described. I would like to think that although we don't want to change the rules as often as rugby and cricket change the rules of their various competitions, we'd like to move the Gold Standard Award along in a direction that will hopefully deal with the good side and the bad side of the race day experience. Those of you who are in regulated employment as part of your day job will know there's a spectrum between comply or explain, And I'd quite like to see the Gold Standard or its successor move to that right-hand end of the spectrum, where a racecourse has to explain to us why it thinks it should receive an accolade. And we'll then be able to deal quite even-handedly across all forms of racecourse, some of whom will have parade rings that are big enough for entourages, some of whom will have to have more restrictions on their parade rings. Different racecourses will be able to enhance the experience in different ways. And it will be very hard for a racecourse that has a drink problem, or those who visit that racecourse have a drink problem, to say that, yes, we think we should qualify for an accolade. I mentioned Stephen Astaire. Those of you who have read the annual report will see that Stephen Astaire says that he thinks that in time every racecourse should offer an owner a 3-course meal. I'll just add one caveat, and that is so long as they want a 3-course meal. When I go to Kempton, they know my foibles and they give me tomato soup and fish and chips. And that's how the race day experience should be. It should be what you want as an owner. And most of you don't want to have to shield your children from some of the boorish effects of overindulgence in alcohol. And we like to think that moving the accolade in a direction of you racecourse, tell us why you should be singled out for the way you deal with owners, ought to be able to crack an awful lot of nuts with not too big a sledgehammer.
Can I just add to that, as you've mentioned me a few times? I think that quote was quite a few years ago, and I promise not to pun. I think what I always wanted to achieve was a situation where you go back 20 years ago and owners probably didn't even get a cup of tea at a racecourse. Now you are getting fed. Obviously, bigger courses have bigger infrastructure. They can offer better deals. But I think if you go around the smaller courses, and we all have a number of courses on the committee that we look at, and mine, I have a lot of small courses, they are raising their game. They are giving a much better offering now. And I think they are treating owners much more as the top of their customer base, where in the past we were just an added-on bit who happened to come with the horse. So I think that owners should be appreciative of the efforts that smaller courses in particular are making, because we've come a long way from getting nothing to what we have now.
Nick Cooper would just like to add one final point.
I'm very sympathetic to the question. You know, you shouldn't have, in this world, the cost of running a horse to turn up and not enjoy the afternoon. That's absolutely disgusting. Maybe we should think of a way where we do the survey, top courses. Maybe we should grade the entertainment. Start at good and end up drunken disaster. And maybe we should print that and take a lead. So we're going to take that away. I'm quite moved by what you said, and have a think about it. Thank you.
Time for one more question. Yeah.
Thank you, David. David Brocklehurst, Charlottestad. Charlie, could you say something about how the ROA are assisting the BHA in their review of bloodstock trading and racehorse trading?
Absolutely, David. So, as you're well aware, the BHA undertook a review of the bloodstock buying and selling process. That review is just about to kick off. I don't believe any interviews have started yet. Certainly, I've been made contact with just recently. So that'll be unfolding over the coming weeks and months, and I'm sure it's something that Nick will be able to touch on. We're certainly involved in it. We'll certainly be giving our views and opinions on it. And I know that there are members who have got experiences, both good and constructive, that they'll wish to put across during the review. So we'll make sure that that is enabled.